Doctor is betrayed by her husband and loses all her assets to a younger woman. Years later, she encounters the mistress on her operating table. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. The hospital hallways were silent at night, a kind of silence that filled the space between life and death. Dr. Clara Mendez had grown accustomed to it over her years of dedication, a service that felt closer to a calling than a career. But tonight, under the harsh fluorescent lights, that silence mocked her. Her hands trembled slightly, a rare occurrence, one she hadn't felt since her earliest days in medical school. She knew it wasn't the weight of the work. It was the gaping wound left behind by her husband, Andre. It had been 2 months since he had left her. 2 brutal months filled with betrayal and pain. Clara still remembered the sharp cut of his words, the way he had looked her in the eyes, delivering the news with the calm precision of a man entirely devoid of guilt. "I'm leaving," he'd said simply, like he was announcing the end of a minor inconvenience. "Laura and I are going to start over. She makes me feel alive again, Clara." He'd packed his things that very night, leaving her alone in the home they'd built together. But the cruelest part was yet to come. In the days that followed, Clara learned the full scope of his betrayal. Not only had he taken their savings, but he'd also convinced her to sign papers she thought were refinancing their mortgage, only to realize she'd essentially handed him ownership of the house. Everything, their home, their savings, their shared dreams, was now his, or more precisely, his and Laura's. Clara had wanted to crumble, to scream, to hide from the world. Instead, she channeled her pain into work, losing herself in the solace of the hospital, in the rhythm of life-saving. Her reputation as one of the finest surgeons had only grown since, though now it came with whispers of pity behind her back. But tonight was different. Something in the air was charged, a tension that crept up her spine and made her wary. The call had come from the ER barely minutes ago, an emergency. A car accident. A woman in critical condition. Clara had listened as the paramedics recited the injuries over the phone, but her mind wandered, her heart pulling in a strange direction. Then came the patient's name. Laura Siqueira. Her heart stopped. The world seemed to narrow as she processed the words, the reality settling over her with a cold, unyielding weight. It was Laura, his Laura. The woman who had taken her husband, her home, her life. And she was in Clara's hands. The irony was almost unbearable. Clara felt a war raging inside her as she scrubbed in. Her mind a chaotic mix of professionalism and fury. Her fingers clenched and unclenched as she prepared, struggling to rein in the emotions that threatened to consume her. The moment she stepped into the operating room, however, Clara slipped into the focused calm that was her hallmark. She couldn't afford to be Clara, the woman who'd been betrayed. She had to be Dr. Mendez, the surgeon, the healer. There would be time to process the twisted fate that had brought Laura onto her table, but it would have to wait. The next hour was an intense blur of decisions and skill. Laura's injuries were severe. Broken ribs, punctured lung, internal bleeding. Clara's hands moved with practiced expertise, yet the knowledge of who lay on her table gnawed at her. Each cut, each stitch, felt like an echo of the wounds Clara herself had endured. At one point, Laura's vitals dipped dangerously low, her heart slowing to a treacherous beat. The surgical team froze, awaiting Clara's command, and she felt the weight of it settle over her. She could make a call, a choice, and no one would ever know. The very thought horrified her. Yet there it was, lurking at the edges of her mind, a darkness she hadn't known she was capable of. The world had stolen so much from her. Why shouldn't she let fate take its course? But Clara pushed the thought away, disgusted with herself. Her hands steadied, her mind cleared, and she moved forward with a determination that bordered on defiance. If she saved Laura's life, it wouldn't be for Andre, and it certainly wouldn't be for the woman herself. It would be for Clara, for the woman who wouldn't let her integrity be tarnished by betrayal. She wasn't about to let them take her moral compass along with everything else. Finally, the surgery ended. Laura's life was no longer hanging by a thread. Clara had stitched her together, quite literally. The rest would be up to the recovery process and Laura's own resilience. Exhausted, Clara left the oar, peeling off her gloves and staring at her own hands, wondering how they had managed to save the very woman who had destroyed her life. The silence was broken by a nurse's hesitant voice. "Dr. Mendez. The husband, he's here. He's asking if he can see you." Clara's breath caught. Andre was here. Course he was. The selfish, narcissistic man would never miss a chance to swoop in, to put on the facade of the loving partner. She could picture him now, feigning concern, hoping to play the dutiful man by Laura's side. But what would he think when he realized that the person who had saved his precious Laura was the very woman he'd left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life? Her heart hammered in her chest as she nodded, following the nurse to the waiting room where Andre was pacing, his face a mask of poorly concealed distress. When he saw her, his expression shifted from relief to something far more complex, a mixture of guilt and discomfort that Clara found strangely satisfying. "Clara," he began, stepping forward, but she held up a hand, cutting him off. "Dr. Mendez," she corrected, her voice cold, professional. She took a breath, steadied herself, and met his gaze. "She'll be fine. I've done my job. Laura's stable, but the road to recovery will be long." Andre seemed taken aback, clearly unsure how to respond. "Thank you," he said, his voice softer. "Really? Clara, I didn't expect." "You didn't expect what?" she interrupted, her voice steel-edged. "That I'd save her life. That I'd have the decency to treat her like any other patient despite what the two of you did to me." The words hung between them, raw and unfiltered. Andre looked away, guilt flashing across his features. "You're right," he admitted. "I didn't expect you to be so strong." Clara laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "Funny. You never really knew me at all, did you?" With that, she turned on her heel and left him standing there, alone in the sterile brightness of the hospital's waiting room. For the first time in months, Clara felt a glimmer of triumph. She had saved Laura, yes, but she had also taken back a piece of herself. In the act of healing another, she had begun to heal her own wounds, wounds Andre and Laura had so carelessly inflicted. As she walked away, she realized that this was only the beginning. The true test lay ahead, in the long road of self-discovery and rebuilding. Clara had faced her past tonight, and for the first time, she was ready to embrace her future, free from the shadows of betrayal. The days following the surgery passed in a haze of relentless work and sleepless nights. Clara moved through the hospital halls like a ghost, her mind torn between the present and the past, between duty and resentment. Though she had saved Laura's life, the memory of her husband's face in the waiting room clung to her like a shadow. Andre's stunned expression had offered her a sense of validation she hadn't expected, a strange satisfaction in watching him grapple with the reality of her strength. Still, the victory felt hollow. She had confronted him, but nothing had changed the fact that he had discarded her so easily, leaving her to rebuild her life from the ground up. And while she had saved Laura, she couldn't deny that the bitterness lingered. One night, as she reviewed patient charts in her cramped office, a knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. She looked up, her expression hardening as she recognized the figure in the doorway. It was Andre. "What do you want?" Clara asked coldly, barely looking up from her work. He cleared his throat, stepping inside and closing the door. "Hey, I just wanted to thank you again for what you did. You didn't have to save her, but you did. It must have been hard." Clara snorted, dropping her pen and finally meeting his gaze. "Hard? That doesn't even begin to describe it. But unlike some people, I don't get to pick and choose who deserves to live based on my personal grudges. I'm a doctor, Andre. I took an oath." He nodded, visibly uncomfortable under her fierce stare. "I know, Clara, and I'm sorry. I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" she echoed, incredulous. "Is that what you call leaving me with nothing while you built a new life with her? Taking everything we built together and handing it over to someone else?" Andre's face contorted with guilt, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. "I never meant for it to happen like this, Clara. I was just lost. I thought Laura could give me something I was missing." Clara's laugh was hollow, devoid of humor. "Missing? You were missing loyalty, Andre. You threw me away because you wanted something easier, more exciting. And now you come here, thinking you can apologize and expect me to absolve you." She shook her head, her voice laced with anger and pain. "I don't need your apologies. They're meaningless now." Andre shifted, clearly taken aback by the force of her words. "Clara, can't we at least try to talk? To work through this?" "Work through this," she repeated, her voice rising. "There's nothing left to work through, Andre. I have rebuilt myself from the ashes you left behind. You think a few words can erase the pain you caused? You think gratitude will make up for the fact that you left me with nothing?" For a moment, silence settled between them, thick with unspoken words and unresolved tension. Then Andre spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Laura, she's not what I thought she'd be, Clara. She's different now. I thought I knew her, but lately, it feels like I'm living with a stranger." Clara's eyes narrowed. "And you expect sympathy from me for that?" "No," he admitted, looking away. "I don't expect anything. I just thought, maybe you'd understand." "Understand," she echoed, bitterness coating her voice. "I understand that you took my love and loyalty for granted, that you discarded me the moment you found someone else to fill whatever emptiness you felt. And now that it's not working out with her, you're here to unburden yourself, hoping I'll be your sympathetic ear." He opened his mouth to argue, but Clara held up a hand, silencing him. "Save it, Andre. Go back to her. You made your choice, and now you live with it." He stared at her, defeated, his shoulders slumping. Finally, he nodded, leaving her office without another word. The door clicked shut, and Clara released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. A sense of relief washed over her, mingling with a simmering anger she knew would take time to dissipate. For the first time, she felt free from his grasp, liberated from the shadow he had cast over her life. In the following weeks, Clara poured herself into her work, finding solace in the certainty and purpose of her profession. She became the embodiment of dedication, her patient's well-being her only priority. The gossip among her colleagues faded into the background, her focus so intense that she barely registered the whispers. She was Dr. Mendez, the surgeon, a woman who had faced her past and emerged unbroken. But fate wasn't done testing her. One evening, as Clara prepared to leave the hospital, she received a message from Laura herself. The woman was requesting a meeting, asking for Clara's presence in her hospital room. Clara hesitated, the weight of the request pressing down on her. She had saved Laura's life. Wasn't that enough? Did she really owe this woman more of her time, her energy? Against her better judgment, Clara found herself standing outside Laura's hospital room, steeling herself for whatever awaited her on the other side. She pushed open the door, her face an unreadable mask as she stepped inside. Laura lay propped up on the bed, her face pale but alert, her eyes fixed on Clara with a mixture of gratitude and something else, something that looked almost like fear. Clara remained by the door, her arms crossed, waiting for Laura to speak. "Thank you," Laura began softly, her voice thin and shaky. I know I don't deserve your kindness, but I wanted you to know that I'm grateful. You saved my life, and I'll never be able to repay you for that." Clara's expression didn't waver. "I didn't do it for you," she replied bluntly. "I did it because it was my job." Laura nodded, her eyes cast down in shame. "No. And I also know that I owe you more than just my life. I owe you an apology." Clara's eyes narrowed, skepticism hardening her features. "An apology? You think that's enough?" Laura looked up, her gaze pleading. I didn't mean to ruin your life, Clara. I didn't know Andre would leave you with nothing. I thought it would just be a clean break." "Clean?" Clara's voice trembled with anger. "Do you have any idea what you did to me? You took everything from me, my husband, my home, my stability. You left me in ruins. And now you think an apology will somehow make it right." Tears glistened in Laura's eyes, and for a moment, Clara felt a pang of satisfaction. But then Laura spoke, her voice cracking with vulnerability. "I made a mistake, Clara. Thought Andre loved me. I thought he wanted a life with me. But now I see that he was just running from his own demons. And I was too blinded by my own selfishness to realize the damage we were causing. Clara remained silent, her jaw clenched, her mind a storm of conflicting emotions. She wanted to scream, to tell Laura that her regret meant nothing to her. But something in the woman's broken expression held her back. It wasn't forgiveness that stirred within her. It was something more profound, a sense of closure. For so long, Clara had believed that Laura was the sole architect of her pain. But standing there, looking at the remorseful figure in front of her, she realized that Andre's betrayal was a deeper, more personal wound. Laura might have been the spark, but Andre had been the one to strike the match. With a steadying breath, Clara spoke, her voice cold but composed. I don't forgive you, Laura, but I'm done letting you and Andre control my life. I saved you because that's who I am, not for your sake but for mine. And now, I think it's time I finally move on. Laura nodded, her face crumbling as Clara turned to leave. The door closed behind her with a quiet click, and Clara walked down the hallway, her steps resolute. The weight on her shoulders lifted with each step, a newfound strength filling the spaces that Andre and Laura had left hollow. For the first time, Clara felt the freedom of letting go. She had faced the darkest parts of her past, and in doing so, she had reclaimed herself. There would be challenges ahead, yes, but she was no longer bound by the betrayal that had once defined her. With her encounter with Laura behind her, Clara's life took on a new rhythm. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of purpose that went beyond survival, beyond the need to prove herself to anyone else. She'd faced both Laura and Andre, confronted the pain they'd caused, and emerged stronger. Each day was a fresh page, a new opportunity to reshape her life on her own terms. The transformation wasn't immediate. There were moments when bitterness still tugged at her, memories of Andre's betrayal surfacing like stubborn scars. But Clara met these feelings with a quiet resolve, refusing to let them pull her back into the past. Her life was no longer defined by what she'd lost but by what she was building anew. Her reputation at the hospital flourished, her colleagues admiring her resilience and skill. Clara became known not only for her surgical expertise but for her compassion, a quality she hadn't fully appreciated in herself until her encounter with Laura. Word of her integrity spread beyond the hospital, and soon opportunities began to knock on her door. One evening, after a particularly grueling double shift, Clara received a call from Dr. Martinez, the director of a renowned medical research institute. He wanted to discuss an exciting position on his team, a role that would allow her to lead a new division in advanced trauma surgery. The institute had taken notice of her work, especially her ability to remain calm under pressure and her impeccable track record in life-or-death situations. The offer felt like a turning point. 4 years, she'd thought her career at the hospital was the pinnacle of her success, the only legacy she could leave. But the chance to be part of something larger, to pioneer advancements that could save countless lives, awakened a spark in her. It was as if the universe was finally aligning, rewarding her strength and tenacity with an opportunity to make a true impact. Clara accepted the offer, and within weeks, she transitioned into her new role at the institute. The environment was challenging, pushing her skills to new heights, but Clara thrived under the pressure. She poured her heart into her work, finding a sense of purpose that transcended the pain of her past. One day, while preparing for a presentation on her latest research, Clara received an unexpected email. The subject line made her pause, her heart sinking even as her curiosity peaked. It read, "From Laura Siqueira." Clara hesitated, her fingers hovering over the mouse. She hadn't heard from Laura since that last conversation in the hospital room. Part of her wanted to delete the email, to leave that chapter closed. But something compelled her to open it. The message was brief, and as she read, Clara's emotions shifted from curiosity to shock. "Dear Clara, I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I feel it's my responsibility to tell you the truth about what happened. Andre lied to both of us. He manipulated you into signing those papers under the guise of refinancing because he knew he was going to leave. He set everything up to ensure you would be left with nothing, even convincing me that you had agreed to it as part of the separation. I was blinded by his charm, his promises. But I see now the kind of man he truly is. I left him, Clara. I couldn't bear to be with someone who could destroy a person he once loved. I don't expect you to feel sorry for me, but I wanted you to know that I am as much a victim of his deception as you were. He's alone now, and perhaps that is the only justice I can offer. Thank you for saving my life, even when I didn't deserve it. Sincerely, Laure. Clara sat back, her mind reeling. She'd suspected that André had manipulated her, but seeing the confirmation in Laura's words stirred a complex mix of emotions. The anger was there, yes, but it was different this time. There was no desire for revenge, no lingering hatred. Instead, Clara felt a strange sense of relief. André had lost everything. The wife who had been loyal to him, the lover he had betrayed her for, and even the respect of those who had once admired him. He was left with only the shell of the life he had tried to construct at her expense. And now, Clara saw that she had won something far greater. Her freedom, her integrity, and a future unburdened by his deceit. She closed the email, a quiet smile tugging at her lips. The universe, it seemed, had a way of setting things right. Months passed, and Clara's life continued to evolve in unexpected ways. Her work at the Institute became her passion, her dedication and innovation gaining recognition and respect from colleagues around the world. She traveled to conferences, presented groundbreaking research, and even began mentoring young surgeons who looked up to her resilience as much as her skill. Through it all, she remained grounded, grateful for the journey that had brought her here, even the painful parts. For in that pain, she had found her true strength, the inner resolve that had carried her through the darkest times. One evening, after returning from a conference, Clara received a call from her former hospital's board. They were considering her for a prestigious award, an honor reserved for surgeons who had made a lasting impact on the community. Clara felt a swell of pride, knowing that her contributions had left a legacy that transcended her personal struggles. The ceremony took place in a grand hall, filled with familiar faces, some of whom had known her during the most difficult moments of her life. As Clara took the stage, she looked out over the audience, feeling a sense of closure and fulfillment she hadn't anticipated. Her past was no longer a source of pain but a foundation upon which she had built a life of purpose. As she began her speech, Clara's mind drifted to the journey that had led her here. She spoke not only of her achievements but of the lessons she had learned along the way, the importance of resilience, the value of integrity, and the power of forgiveness, not for others but for oneself. Afterward, as she mingled with the attendees, Clara spotted André standing near the exit, watching her with a look of regret etched deeply into his face. He seemed smaller somehow, diminished, as if the weight of his choices had finally taken its toll. Clara met his gaze, offering him a small nod before turning away, no longer needing any acknowledgement from him. Her journey was complete. Back in her hotel room that night, Clara looked out over the city lights, feeling a profound sense of peace. She was free from the past, from the wounds that had once defined her. She had rebuilt her life on her own terms, and in doing so, had found a strength she never knew she possessed. As she prepared for bed, her phone chimed with a message. It was from one of her young ments, a promising student who had been inspired by Clara's story. The message was simple, but it brought a smile to Clara's face, a reminder of the impact she had made. Dr. Mendez, thank you for being an example of strength and compassion. I hope to become a surgeon like you one day. Clara placed the phone on her bedside table, her heart swelling with pride. She had endured betrayal and loss, but through it all, she had held on to her integrity, her humanity. And in the end, that was her greatest victory. As she drifted off to sleep, Clara knew that she was finally at peace with herself and her past. Her story was one of resilience, of transformation, and of a woman who had risen above betrayal to reclaim her life. And as the city lights flickered below, she knew that her journey was just beginning, each day a testament to her strength, her courage, and her unwavering commitment to her own happiness. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story.